Let's watch this.
Getting into fighting games in your 30s can feel really, really late. If you actually want to win and play competitively, you might not even feel it's worth the start. Fighting games take dozens of hours to learn, and hundreds and honestly perhaps thousands of hours to actually master. And this is different for each game. Is it a 2D game like Street Fighter or a 3D like Tekken and Soul Calibur? Is it an anime fighter with air dashes? Is it a 4-button game or a 6 or 8-button one? Does it have online play or local only? All of these reasons and more, which we'll get to in a minute,
What is this game?
are some of the biggest reasons why I never played fighting games growing up. But for some reason I can't quite explain, I started playing fighting games in my 30s, and I became absolutely 100% addicted.
Yeah, because it's just fire.
If you're in or about to be in your 30s and you've ever thought about playing fighting games, and maybe you've even dabbled here and there, and if you ever wondered if you should really put in the time now to learn specials and optimal combos and character matchups to play against people who have been playing for years or decades, then get comfortable, sit back, and let me tell you why I got so into fighting games in my 30s. And now maybe you should too. If you tell someone in the FGC, that's the fighting game community for all you people with normal, stable lives, that you play Super Smash Brothers, you're gonna have a bad time. In the FGC, these sweaty, single, try-hard fighting game nerdlingers are really picky with what games are actual fighting games and which are not. You see, fighting games, and even many of their most devoted players, are inherently picky, finicky, and challenging. These games are brutal, and usually require dozens, but more like hundreds of hours to learn. In recent Tekken games, one of the most simple actions a player can do, move backwards, requires weeks, even months of consistent and diligent training to perform the fabled Korean backdash.
Pretty much.
Newcomers to the game have to deal with facing dozens of new fighters, and each with dozens, or in Tekken's case, hundreds of moves to account for. It's a lot. It's one of the reasons why I never got into fighting games, except Smash Brothers, which, as anyone in the FGC will tell you, doesn't count as a fighting game. Yet, that was my background when I first started getting into the FGC in my 30s. I've been playing Smash my whole life, even reaching the top 1% in the world or so. For a while before I had kids, I have to admit, I had this real dream of becoming a professional Smash player. I hired professionals to coach me. I watched my replays and took notes. I spent hundreds of hours studying matchups and flowcharts, but after about 1,000 hours clocked in the game, like 50 tournaments later, I got kind of tapped out. Now I just kick all my friends' asses in every replay, which is fun in its own way. Around the time I decided to quit Smash, a buddy of mine was always talking about fighting games. You know, the real ones. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Marvel vs. Capcom, Killer Instinct. Also, I love how some of these games are just like a mess of random words strung together. Grand Blue Fantasy versus Rising. Capcom versus SNK2, Mark of the Millennium 2001. And of course, Tekken.
What a beautiful game.
Now look, I wasn't an absolutely filthy casual. I did play lots of Tekken 3 at the local bowling alley growing up at all my friends' birthday parties, mashing buttons as hard as I could to make the guy who looked like Bruce Lee do backflips. But still, that was the extent of my fighting game experience. It wasn't until Street Fighter 6 came out last year that I even learned what the fuck a Dragon Punch input was. But in 2021, Tekken 7 was on sale for like $12, and my buddy convinced me to buy it. And oh boy, I was not ready for what was about to happen next.
Yep, you got addicted, fam.
I'm a competitive guy, and throughout my 300-ish hours in Tekken 7, I never ever booted up any other game mode besides practice mode and online ranked. I wanted to win, and that's what I set out to do. Playing Tekken 7 online and rising through the ranks is this really complicated, needlessly difficult process. People on PC can cheat. Points for winning have no rhyme or reason. And even after 300 hours of playing online, I never even made it to the upper half of the ranking system. It was also here that I learned how the FGC can usually be its own worst enemy, making it even more difficult for newcomers to the genre. Not just because games like Tekken have like 30 years of history across almost a dozen titles, having a huge emphasis on legacy knowledge, meaning that if you played the game before, you're at a distinct advantage over newcomers who have not seen the moves. Not that it's just a 3 fucking dimensional game, not that each character has over 100 moves and some of them have 200, but the players behind the characters themselves. As a complete newcomer to the scene, I experienced more than my fair share of teabagging douchebags who would brag about beating a scrub like me. The online netcode was poor, meaning finding matches was tough and could take a while. People could easily rage quit, stalling the game and robbing me of my hard-fought rank points. I remember one Ganryo player literally spamming the same low poke for 3 straight rounds as I flailed helplessly, mashing buttons, trying anything to just make it stop. I learned months later just block low and hit is probably minus on block. And the list goes on. Tekken and fighting games in general were tough, no doubt a freaking about it. But why did I love it so much?
Because you want to get good, bro.
As hard as this 3-dimensional game was, featuring nearly 50 characters boasting thousands of moves, I couldn't stop playing. Because the few times I did win felt incredible. Finally landing a combo in a live match that you've been practicing for days, adapting to a tough opponent strategy and beating them instead, or squeezing out a well-deserved strategic win from the jaws of defeat. God, I loved it. I was addicted. I had a pregnant wife and a young kid, and it didn't matter. I squeezed in my matches whenever I could.
Huh?
I pre-ordered Tekken 8, and I was at the store within an hour of opening on release day. And I put in like 30 hours that first week, which is not easy to do with a wife, 2 young kids, and a full-time job. Now look, you might be thinking, okay, great, fighting games can be awesome, but they're still really hard to get into. And you'd be absolutely right. That's why I need to address the biggest barrier to entering the genre, even more than the skill gap: money. Fighting games are expensive. Let's go back to Super Smash Bros. For a second here. Every kid in every class I ever had played Smash, at their house or someone else's. And with almost 75 million copies sold throughout the entire franchise, people play this freaking game. Why? Obviously, Nintendo struck gold by creating this super fun fighting game featuring the most iconic characters in video game history, but more than that, it was accessible as a game. Anyone could pick up their stock controller, move their joystick, and mash A, B, or those weird yellow...
Yeah, no, so what's good? Talk to me. What do you got for us? So real talk, the investment for fighting games, if you want to compete, is fucking crazy. Yeah, because you got to think about it. Season 1 of Street Fighter has the Battle Pass, which is $20 to get the 4 characters. Then you got to have like a $200 hitbox or so. Then you got to pay to get into the tournaments. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's a lot of money.
Yellow C buttons, and your character would probably do some pretty cool shit. And that was that. All your friends knew how to play. You could learn the game pretty quickly. And everyone had everything needed.
It's worse. You say it's worse than Magic the Gathering. I don't know if I agree with that. Some people tell me they got $600 decks, $2,000 decks. I'm like, what the hell? You guys spend this much money on a deck? That's crazy.
Have fun. Console, the default controller came with it, and the game. In comparison, fighting games are so damn expensive. I first learned this playing Tekken 7, my first true fighting game. I had never used a fight stick. Why would I? And I wasn't even sure I liked fighting games, so I just used my PS4 controller. I made sure to look it up. Yes, countless pros played using default PS4 controllers, but there were definite advantages of fight sticks that default controllers just couldn't match me. And I wanted to give myself every advantage possible. Arcade sticks are not cheap. I'm still using this old Mayflash F300 my friend gave me.
What?
And even those old-ass models still cost like as much as a freaking DualSense for the PS5 now. You want a nice fight stick? be ready to shell out at least $150. Probably closer to $250 instead. And we're not even close to the best fight sticks yet. Those things can cost like $400 for one controller. And you're going to use it for like what, 3, maybe 4 games, more like 1 or 2?
I mean, I use my fight stick for a lot of games.
For some reason, console makers just like hate making accommodations for fight sticks to connect to consoles. So you'll probably need to buy some adapter to make sure your fight stick even works with your current gen console. Another $60 or so. Hey, what about modding your controller? More and more money. I bought a YZ keypad to replace the joystick. I also bought a janky adapter that didn't work. Then a premium adapter that did work, all just to play Street Fighter 6 on my PS5. A new console
got crazy with
$500,
the setup right
a
here.
new game is like $60 or $70, a fight stick, an adapter, and any customization you want, plus an online subscription to play the small minority of gamers that actually play this niche genre of fighting games. That shit gets real expensive real quick. Not to mention the incredibly high learning curve, and you've got a recipe for a video game that most gamers will never get into, which is sad, because as someone who is never into fighting games, I freaking love them now.
I tried telling Tinky years ago, bro, you need to get into fighting games. Real fighting games.
This last year was my first time I ever went to EVO, the mecca of all true fighting game aficionados. With over 7,000 entrants in Street Fighter 6 alone, EVO 2023 was the biggest EVO in its long history since 1996. Street Fighter 6 came out in June, and EVO will be 2 months later in August. I remember creating a specific training plan for myself to practice Street Fighter 6, that being my first Street Fighter game, with one goal for EVO: to not go 0-2 in the tournament, to win at least one game. So for 8 weeks I practiced. My first test before EVO was this big local tournament a few weeks after Street Fighter 6 came out.
Yo, hang in, welcome in, fam.
With about 80 entrants, I sadly went 0-2. I didn't get smacked, and I was proud of my showing, taking a few rounds here and there, and I might have even beat my second opponent had my jank-ass adapter not kept cutting out mid-match. It was my first real taste into what true FGC victors were capable of. Finally, it was time for EVO. With 8 straight weeks of practice under my belt for Street Fighter 6, I was feeling more and more excited about my chances, and
Yo, Foot Slap, welcome in. James, welcome in.
I actually did much better in Tekken pools. I went 2-2 before getting booted out, and I was really proud of myself. And honestly, it was just really cool seeing incredible FGC legends like Daigo and Justin Wong up close. But I realized a few things at EVO 2023. First was that I would never reach a top 8 placing for a fighting game. I'm just not going to do it. I put in over 1,000 hours in Smash Ultimate, and I never made waves at any small local tournaments with a bunch of other competitive amateurs like me. I've got a chance to play against several professional Smash players, and I'm no genius, but I quickly realized how much farther along they were than me. Part of it was stuff I could control.
I mean, bro, listen, I'm not trying to hate on this guy, but this guy said he got Tekken 7 in 2021, and when Tekken 8 came out, he only had 300 hours in Tekken 7. Now, I'm not trying to do the math for nobody, but that's less than 100 hours a year. But I have no clue what game this chibi game is. Arshivan. Let's look up this guy. Arshivan combos. Let's see. Pocket Bravery. It's called Pocket Bravery. Pocket Bravery. I got you.
If I put in 1,000 hours, these guys are putting 5, maybe even 10,000 hours though. And parts of it was stuff I couldn't control. A natural obsession with fighting games. The innate desire to play the same game for many, many years on end. The ability and desire to sift through countless flowcharts, scenarios, and matchups, and a vibrant community to keep me focused. Look, I'm married with 2 young kids, and going to a 4-hour local tournament on a Saturday night when my wife's at home watching our crazy kids for me, just to get 56th out of 70th place and have no prize winnings, that is not a recipe for a happy marriage or family. And that's all right. I can still have, and I do have, enormous amounts of fun playing online at home, sharing great gaming stories with a handful of friends who like fighting games, and watching major tournaments where I can understand what I'm seeing, what's going on. But look, the main reason I got addicted to fighting games at 30, the biggest reason, is because of something fighting games can give me that I really can't get anywhere else right now. Fighting games force me to be great.
He's not lying.
Fighting games demand I play with greatness. They force me to be my absolute best, my most focused, dedicated, poised, patient self, and consistently overcome nerves, frustration, anger, panic, fear, and discouragement. Because fighting games don't care if you lose. Fighting games simply reflect who you are, or to know. And you might not like what you see. But what fighting games give you is a chance to be better, to become.
I told Tinky this years ago. Fighting games force you to be intrinsic and figure out, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes?
Better. To give your absolute very best all the time. Also, you don't need to go professional to enjoy fighting games. Hell, you could never reach or even get close to the top ranks of a game. You can still have enormous fun, excitement, and adrenaline playing people around the same middling skill level as you. And I do. Playing someone in an online ranked match is actually a really intimate experience if you think about it. As Anne Frank, of all people, once said, you only really get to know a person after a fight. Only then can you judge their true characters.
Man, is quoting Anne Frank in a video about fighting games? Hold on.
You really get to know someone when you fight them in a fighting game, or their character. You see when people panic or keep their cool. You see people falling for your tricks or making you fall into some of their own. You see their patience or frustration when things aren't going their way. You see their poise, their focus, their execution. You see games within games within games, and the only people who will ever know what it felt like was you two in that one particular game. For me, that's why I never want to teabag or ever feel the urge to shit on other players. Unless they're whoring me, because those guys are just hopeless. Because look, they're the same as me. A crazy, obsessive fighting game nerd who has put hundreds and maybe thousands of hours like me into the same game. There's a lot to love about fighting games. The learning curve is extreme. The cost to enter can be really freaking high. But if you can last, you can experience what it feels like to be forced to try your absolute ultimate best against someone who is doing the same. And honestly, that's why I became addicted to fighting games in my 30s. Thanks for watching.
Excellent video. This React segment was great tonight, guys.